This is Thorin's YouTube channel. Make sure you're tuning in, hitting subscribe.
Right, this is going to be another episode of Talk to Thorin, and my guest for this one is going to be Lekr0, who has played for pretty much all the Swedish teams at this point in time. GODSENT, FNATIC, obviously NiP most recently. And we're going to talk a little bit about his career and obviously some of the things that happened more recently. So let's start out early on, actually, because one thing I noticed that's quite it's just an example of how people who are commentators and casters, like they have certain narratives that they just use for everyone. So any player who hasn't yet become like the absolute best player is always like either like rising talent or like young star. Like you always emphasize that they're young. But what's funny is I looked it up and you're actually someone who's more in the position of people like Valde, Jax, etc. Like you actually didn't get to the top level until you were like 23 or something at that GODSENT team, right? So what were you doing all the time before that? Were you an active CS pro for many years before that? Were you trying to go pro? What was going on?
I was playing in different teams, mostly like for fun, and playing some like ESEA lower levels and stuff like that, cause like having fun. But I had a job on the side at the same time because I had to make money. But eventually, once I started grinding and I got an offer from Publiclear, that's when I kind of started traveling more, getting to lands, and that's how I got spotted, getting like up in the rankings.
How did you get specifically into GODSENT though? Because obviously, like most of the other players in GODSENT were pretty well-known players. Like actually, a lot of them had been around years and years and years, and like I can understand with the connection that Pronax had to all the other players. How did you get picked out? Like who picked you out or recommended you?
So I started playing in Publiclear, and we got invited to FPL, and I started grinding a lot, and some people started like getting annoyed because I was playing pretty good. So after a while, I got an offer from I think Pronax wrote to me, but it was the recommendation of Twist, I think, Twist or Pronax that decided to let me get in on a trial.
When you say that, like the fact that you were good annoyed them, that is sort of the way it happens when you're like a newer player, right? Like if you're good, somehow other people can't just be happy for that. You either have to cheat or it's even if they don't think you cheat, it just annoys them that you're good at the game, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, yeah, this guy's tryharding real good and you're getting on people's nerves, and that's usually a good thing in FPL.
Sure. One thing I want to ask you, it'll sound like a strange question, right? But everyone knows you are very famous for having a really good deagle, especially like obviously like the first bullet. Right, it's not as though like I've looked. Not one thing that's unusual is it's not like your aim's the craziest on every other weapon though. Why on that one weapon do you think it's so good?
I don't know. I think I have good positioning, and like I usually have the crosshair always in the head sight. So I think I'm just really good at just holding different angles, finding off angles and stuff like that. So I usually get advantage in duels that way.
One question I have, without this sounding like I'm secretly trying to get better at the deagle myself, is I've known some people who were like semi-pro players who were also had really good skills. And crucially, that's one thing that always separates, I think, casual players from the good ones is how good they are with the pistols. And when some of these guys had these like they looked like Nico, mate. They were just killing like 3 people in a row, all one bullets. And I used to say to some of them, like, isn't it, come on, you're not just aiming like that. Like I can aim on the guy, but it just doesn't kill him. And the thing they told me basically is, like, this is one of the problems with trying to get good at CS. Is trying to get good at CS is like, it's like if you wanted to be a sports pro, it's like work. It's not fun. You're not just playing the game. You don't just get better just from having a fun gather. So they told me one of the secrets of the deagle basically is it's basically all about like you have to like master the counter strafe and you have to know exactly like in the counter strafe when to fight, and like basically like I don't know, did you just pick this up as you went on the game? Did you practice it a lot? What was it like?
Not really. I think it's just something you noticed, like some like players have different tendencies, like jiggling, sitting down after they take a wide strafe. Sure. Or some people just wide strafe completely. So I think the most important is just having a small gap between where they have to fully commit to the duel, and sometimes you just get punished when people jiggle peek with a deagle because you don't hold it with a close angle. You usually have like a gap between it.
Sure. Right, since you played in this GODSENT team, and obviously the leader of that team was Pronax, who, it's funny that his name isn't that big anymore, because he still has 3 majors, like he's had an amazing career. What was he actually like as an in-game leader, since you played with a whole bunch of the different squads now? So how do you explain Pronax as an IGL?
He had a really loose style. He wanted like everyone to be comfortable in game, and I think he really managed to, like everyone in the team was really comfortable, stuff like that. So the loose style works out as long as everyone keeps saying what they're doing and where, so he can like make a call based on that. So people don't just take these 1v1 duels because they think they can win them. But if you're taking a 1v1 duel, he needs to know, because then maybe we can react on this side and stuff like that. So it requires communication from individuals to the game leader a lot.
Now, one thing that people probably also wouldn't be aware of is, like, when you were in this GODSENT team, which was obviously your first big team, you guys had that ridiculous run at the first DreamHack Malmo where, this is the thing that people always forget. People know you went to the semi-finals, but because people forget, like, the flow of a match, the forwards and back, what they forget is, like, you guys were very close to getting to the final of that one. Like, you had NiP right on the ropes then, those first two maps. They just got away because it was NiP. Like, that's why I made that term NiP magic. They just used to just do this shit somehow when every time you think you've beaten them, they'll come back. So like, normally in a career, I always describe it as like a ladder. You go up one rung of the ladder at a time. This was like initially jumping like right to the top of the ladder almost. What was it? Was it surreal to suddenly be right in the mix like that?
I don't know. I think I was really calm in the beginning. It didn't really matter to me that it was like my first big LAN. I didn't feel any pressure or stuff like that. Like I got to play like I did in FPL in previous teams, like Pronax called. So he just let me have like a lot of space to work on. So I wasn't afraid to making mistakes and stuff like that. I would just always like, if I died, it's fine. Maybe don't do it again and stuff like that. But just need to know, like, I got to like choose myself what was good for me, and I think that made it like no pressure at all.
And then after this, obviously, you went over. People will forget this. You had the period in the middle where you were in FNATIC, and it wasn't like you were just in any FNATIC team. You were in also the one that beat FaZe famously in that final that FaZe thought they were going to win. I can tell you, they 100% thought they would win that one. But again, they got denied the title. What was this FNATIC squad like? Because you got to play again with some other like legendary Swedish players here.
I think we were really good at the time, for sure. It was mostly some things outside of the game that we had some problems with. But I think in-game we were really good, and we had this style that was kind of unpredictable, like most FNATIC squads. So I think that's how we managed to beat FaZe, and of course some huge individual plays in that tournament.
When you were in this particular FNATIC team, that was where they had this weird scenario where I know some of this because like I've been friends with Khan for a long time and he's obviously like pretty deep in the FNATIC org. So what the people don't seem to remember, because it came out I think like ages later in interviews, is to the public what it looks like is you guys won this IEM Katowice, you went and won WSG, you had won all this money, and then they all even delete the tournaments after that. They think like right after that tournament you're all just like, you know what, fuck this golden guy, get out the team, and then you just kicked him out in the most heartless way ever. Now I've heard basically something like before these tournaments, because if people forget, in the tournaments before that, there was that Star Series where you came like dead last place. Yeah. I heard before that, basically, there was some issues like in the team, and that basically he was the player already that was looking to potentially be replaced. And then you sort of won these two out of nowhere. Then there was a bunch of tournaments actually that you didn't do as well afterwards that kind of went down again. And then it was already maybe that it exists that you were kind of like looking to get. Can you give us some, like, what it was like on your perspective? Like, how did that move happen? Because obviously, like I say, it's only really remembered now as like evil FNATIC kicked out Golden.
Yeah, I think since we had some shaky results before that, not too many, but there were some problems in game we had some problems with. But after that, when we started to win, we thought about like, we're actually winning. Before I wasn't like in the loop of removing Golden in the beginning, because I was also potential replacement at the same time. I think afterwards, after WSG, we talked together, like something like it's obviously working. So I think like that's why we shouldn't make a roster change.
And then what was the situation with, like, basically, that was the other thing, is that I've actually forgotten the order of this, because again, this is where people, like, there was something going on with that move, because they didn't directly replace Golden with Exist. Bizarrely, right, they replaced you with Exist. Yeah. Golden became the entry fragger, which And that was never going to be the best role for him. And then when he wasn't a good entry fragger, then they just kicked him out, which made it sound like they just wanted to remove him anyway, and maybe you, and then they just did it in this like clever way, basically. Because the public aren't going to argue if then it's just bad entry fragger. Was this a weird move on your half?
I was kind of like expecting. We had some problems within the team in FNATIC with me and some of the players. So I think I had like prepared to at least play until the major, and then I was planning on leaving. But since I got kicked before that, so it didn't go down that way. But after me, I think since they kept Golden and took in Exist, I think they probably had plans to get in another player. But I don't know exactly about that.
What would you say the atmosphere within that FNATIC squad was like? Because one of the things I've also heard just from players is that the whole reason like maybe they didn't like Golden was something along the lines of like, I mean, if you talk to him, he's not like a super, like, he's not the kind of leader who's like, I'm the general and you can all fucking do what I say. Like, he's more like a chilled guy. So the thing is, when you've got really legendary players like that have won a lot, they tend to have like very high standards, or at least they think they do, right? Is that a team where... Is it hard to fit into a team like that? Do they have like expectations of you when you come in? Are they welcoming? What would you say it's like?
I think I was really like welcomed when I started playing with them. I think Golden was as well, of course. But I think when things are getting bad, I think it's like hard to keep control of all these ideas coming up. Maybe for Golden, like at least during my time, it's probably different now. But back then, I think when things go bad, maybe it's like hard to like keep all these people just wanting to give their input and take initiative yourself. But I think they probably worked on that a lot, and they're looking really good right now.
How would you describe Golden as an in-game leader? Like, what are his style and his strengths?
I think he has like a good mix between loose style and the tactical side. Like at the same time, since I think FNATIC are meant to play kind of loose, I don't think you should just go like the Astralis way and play too structural and stuff like that. But I think he mixes the loose style that FNATIC is really good at and how they tend to like have simple executes or just explosive rounds. I think he has a good mix.
Now, famously, back in the day, a couple of years before this, when you used to be able to get those VODs where you could just hear people's comms, what a lot of people don't know is like, listen, everyone listened to like Cloud9 or someone who spoke English, or if they spoke French, they listened to the Envy team. Because I'm a nerd, I went and got people who spoke most of the languages and got like subtitles made for a bunch of these VODs. I want to see like what the atmosphere is like. Yeah. And I always say famously, the Swedish ones were the most underwhelming because FNATIC was people barely speaking. They were just saying simple stuff. Because I mean, those players at the time had played together for so long, it's like they just knew what the other guy was going to do. So the question is this, right? When people see these ridiculous players that JW pulls off, which I always think if you're the opponent must be impossible to predict because some of the shit he's doing, like I don't know how he comes up with it. Does he really come that sort of thing? Like, does he tell you in spawn I'm going to do this, or does he say something as he's doing? Does he really? Because if you play in the game, do you just see suddenly it's just a bunch of kills? What's it like?
For me personally, what I think usually happens is like he has these positions where he can do these plays or get into these positions, and once he like gets into these positions, that's when he like takes charge. So like, just chill down, I have an opportunity or stuff like that. That's like, he makes a simple call, then he plays the round from there. And then based on what happens, instead of just talking while you're doing plays, could make mistakes. So that's like, then he goes quiet and then he does his thing and then we react kind of.
Now, a player who, obviously, when you came over to NiP, you've played with, and he actually played in the FNATIC team after you, is obviously Twist. He was with you in GODSENT. So you've been all around this guy, right? This is another player where once a reputation sticks, like you never get rid of it, basically. So the whole reputation with him was that whole thing of like he didn't want to join NiP for whatever reason years ago, and people just bring that up over and over again. What type of a player is this guy? Because I feel like he's either people think because of the NiP thing he doesn't want to try hard or he doesn't want to win or something, and so there's a very confusing reputation. So who is he as a teammate to you?
He's a really good teammate. He's different now than from before. He's a lot more like supportive and he helps out a team a lot. But before he was in GODSENT, he was like for sure the star player of our team. He was definitely like the best fragger.
Did he want to be? Did he have the attitude for it?
What'd you say?
Did he want to be the star player? Did he kind of have the attitude of like, yeah, give me the guns, give me the spots?
No, not really. I think we kind of gave in GODSENT to him because he was I think like everyone agreed that he was like the best in the team, like based on fragging and stuff like
Sure.
that. So he got a lot of space. I don't think he takes that much space as he did back then. Right now, because he's more of a supportive role. He likes to like support the players in situations, stuff like that, and I think he still does that really good.
Now, when you came over to this NiP squad, people will forget, like now NiP, like in the meantime, got better again and like somewhat turned the reputation on. But you actually joined at the time that was the darkest, which is when they were just losing all those majors in a row and people pretty much just expected a bunch of them to retire. So actually even like winning this minor was a big deal at the time, right? Like what was the atmosphere like inside the team?
I think it was really good. Like sure, we had some like small issues and stuff like that, but there was like no big issues in the team, but I think there showed up a bigger opportunity for them, and that's pretty much why I think it changed in the later events.
When you were in this early version of NiP, another thing that's quite unusual is like this was the prime of the Astralis team when I've always pointed this out. They used to literally, if they didn't win an event, they came second and then they just won the next event basically. Like, they were just almost that unbeatable. Yep. And most of the teams out there actually used to just get beaten 2-0 by them. Like it wouldn't even be close games. But what's weird is even though NiP wasn't like top 3 in the world or anything, it seemed like oftentimes you guys matched up pretty well with them. Like you had a lot of games that were close or that you were in the match. Was there something about the style of NiP that works against Astralis, do you think?
I'm not sure exactly. Like every time, like we kind of got them almost in every tournament. Sometimes we almost had them 2-1 as like really close games. But it felt like we always had like a chance, and our map pool was like a 50-50 based matchup. I think we were good on the same maps, and that's why it usually got really close, because like it was like our best map versus their best map and stuff like that. So it was really map based, I think, a lot.
Right. One of the things as well about NiP that I think a lot of people are confused about is there's like, obviously, and people know on the management end, a lot of different things have happened. People have come and gone. But even in terms of how the team was dealt with, like people know from this recent drama with the whole Peter thing with you, is it seems confusing, like over the last few years, like who has been the person managing the roster? Like I know back in the day, especially in Swedish Counter-Strike, it was always the players. They just said who joined. So back in the day, it would have been Get Right, Forest, whatever they would decide. Then later, when you have coaches, like Peter makes it sound like he sometimes had some say, but then maybe the NiP org also decided who joined and left. So if people remember, even before your move, they had the whole thing with Plopsky coming in, and then Get Right was on, in theory, benched, but then was he benched and was he coming back? Like no one knew where this was all going back and forth. Obviously, Draken came in and out. How would you describe during your time in NiP? How was the team kind of run? Who decided things, do you think?
Sometimes we had like a talk together, like kind of, it's more like a majority decision, but it was kind of, sometimes you weren't kept in the loop and sometimes you were. So, but I think the one time I'm sure about was like when Dennis, it was like a majority vote, and that's the one, that's for sure, like the players and stuff like that.
Because for that one, that's actually another player I want to ask about. Like, this is what a player where, like, from an outsider, like, I don't know him super well as a person. So if I just didn't, I have talked to him about this before, but if I didn't know anything about it, I would just assume from the outside, as easy as this sounds, that he just like lost motivation and stopped playing or something. Because I've often told this story that when he joined NiP, and I was going to make a video trying to give like my thoughts, you know, how will it work out, whatever. I went and watched a load of POVs of his, and he's one of the few players I ever watched where the actual POVs were more impressive than I thought the player was going to be before. Usually it's the opposite, you know, you've just seen the highlights of a player, and then when you see a whole game, you think, nah, this guy's not as good as I thought. Whereas when I actually saw like his playmaking was like his aim, it was all just bonkers. It looked super good. So when a player like that over like say a 6-month span just becomes like half as good, quarter as good, it's always a mystery. Like, can you give any from being in the team? What was he like as a player, and what would your theory be as to what went wrong?
I think he was in the in-game leader in the beginning before I took over. So like when that changed, I think he kind of still had like a bit of the in-game leading in him still left. I think since you're used to in-game leading, and then it's gonna probably take a while before you like get used to that you're not the in-game leader anymore. So I think it took a little bit of time to like make sure like I was calling and but like individually and everything like that, he's a really good player. But I think we had a lot of issues in the team. We had like a slump where we came dead last maybe 2 or 3 times, and we had to make a change. And just logically speaking, it was either me, Dennis, or GetRight, I would say. So I wasn't involved in that decision, but later on it was kind of like voted between how it would be, and yeah, so it was Dennis that was kind of chosen out of us 3. So yeah.
That in itself was one of the weirdest parts of your career, and especially your time in NiP, right? Is that when they brought in Dennis, like, he'd even said before that, like, under no circumstances do I ever want to be an in-game leader again. And then it was like, NiP recruits Dennis, now made in-game leader. So everyone was like, wait a minute. And obviously, he wasn't lying, like, he quickly gave the role up. But then you had the opposite happen to you. You weren't an in-game leader, and basically, like, did you actually volunteer, or did they really just say, well, someone has to do it, so it's you? Like, did you basically get told to be the in-game leader?
I was kind of almost the last one to get asked, since I was really new in the team still. I think Peter asked the other players first, and we kind of just sat down at breakfast, and he was like talking, and he was like, Dennis doesn't want to call, and I've talked to this and this guy. They don't feel like either. And I was like, I can give it a shot and give it like my all to make sure I'm going to stay the in-game leader, because he was afraid to get someone who would like, yeah, I'll try it. And then same thing, a month, 2 months later, they would be like, nah, I can't do it. Never mind. So I felt like if I wasn't gonna in-game lead, like, I don't think the team would have had stayed the same. And so I decided I'll give it like my all. And I think I had a good understanding of the game. So I wasn't like afraid, and I'm not afraid to make mistakes in my calling, because you're not going to make like the best call every round. It's impossible.
Did they switch it up in the meantime, or were you basically the in-game leader for the whole time now? Like, have you been the in-game leader of NiP for like whatever, a year and a half, 2 years or something?
There was the one time when we decided to try GetRight as the in-game leader. We kind of swapped around positions to see if since we had like a slump, we decided like we might as well change some things around and see if everyone finds like a better role in the team. So we decided to swap it around a bit and see if it worked. But we decided to change back after, I think, 2 events. I think we did Sydney, and then we changed back.
And how do you think it went for you as an in-game leader in terms of the role? Like, do you think did you adapt to it well? Did it suit you?
Yeah, I think so. It was like very weird in the beginning. I have like my own way of calling. I kind of like anti-strat like mid-game, because you can't just only anti-strat before the game, because the other team is also going to try to anti-strat you.
Sure.
So you're going to notice what they're trying to do after a few rounds in the game. So I usually adapt a lot like that. I don't tell the plan exactly to my teammates, but just what I need them to do or what I want them to do. And then I usually just try to anti-strat their anti-strat myself, kind of, as an entry fragger while I'm in-game leading, kind of, just to disturb their plans.
It feels like because there was that whole confusion over who was going to be the in-game leader in NiP and the fact that you weren't an in-game leader before, I feel like people forget NiP even had an in-game leader. Like, obviously people have seen the highlights of your play. So, because when I saw some of the people when you got removed now, like bringing up that your stats are just like average stats. It's like, that's average stats for someone who's not the in-game leader. Actually, for an in-game leader, I think your fragging stats are pretty good, actually. Like, you're definitely not like an MSL or one of these players that's more famous for like, you know, like always bottom of the scoreboard. So, like, do you think actually you kept your fragging up decently as in the role? Is it harder?
Like sometimes it's hard, but I think I've been like focusing really on my individual level, and I think it's been going really well lately. So I'm like really confident in myself that way, and the way I'm calling doesn't like, as long as like it depends on kind of the map where I can perform. Some maps are a bit more difficult when you have to micromanage too much, but a lot of the maps we play right now is pretty straightforward. We can take parts of the map and then we can make a call, kind of.
What have you thought of this period when Forrest left? So basically the old lineup was all gone, and you got this lineup where it's all young or people who haven't been like legendary players, basically. And then in comes Threat as the coach fully. And the perspective from outside is like, people think that the two moves are connected. Like the idea was you want Threat because then the idea is if the players aren't like stuck in their way, like some of the champions of the old are, you can mold them. You know, you can really, like, as a coach, is that kind of what you'd want in theory? Is that kind of like what was trying to be done within NiP?
Yeah, I think so. That's kind of the feeling I got, and that we're gonna. It's easier to have these younger players and have them do what you want them to do. And since I was like both the in-game leader and a bit older, I think it was like it's harder to have maybe those easy discussions, I think.
Right, since we came most of this year to the point where we had to watch all the online games, but since the only online games exist, we have to pretend in our brain that's just Counter-Strike now. It is hard to kind of make a characterization of how the year began and how it came to now, because obviously it was offline before and then we came online. But if I think back to Blast, where the lineup first was debuting with Nork, etc., and it looked a bit rough then, but it was like almost immediately after you'd brought him in, and Threat had only just joined as well. And then we look to this period more recently where people have seen all these good results and going head-to-head with a bunch of the top teams and having all these epic series. Has the Threat angle, like when the lineup you were in, had it started to work out? Was he developing it? Because that's one of the reasons I feel like, before we get to it, why people were kind of outraged that you got removed. They felt like things are working. Like, well, you know, the old saying in English is that, you know, you don't fix what's broken. You don't fix it if it's not broken.
Yeah, I agree. I think like when something is working, I think it's better to wait and see, or unless they are sure they have like if they are sure a Threat is the one calling and stuff like that in game, I think sure I would agree. But if that isn't the case, I wouldn't agree to it at all. So I think since what we were doing was working really well, I think it's really weird for them to change as much as they have when I watched recent games.
Now, I saw that when they did this interview with Threat when he was at DreamHack just the other day, basically, like, people think he answered the question as to why, like, you were removed, but he didn't really. All he sort of said is, like, we wanted an in-game leader, Hampus an in-game leader, we went that route. He didn't really say. The problem is he didn't address your side of it, like, why minus Lekr0, basically? What is your theory as to why that was? Like, for example, obviously the drama people have is they think it was only the org and the players weren't involved. Like, from your perspective, do you think some of the other players agreed with it, or did think they needed a different in-game leader? What's your perspective on what happened?
Since what I've heard is that the players didn't know about it beforehand, which I believe as well, based on what I heard after. So it's basically, as the HLTV said, it was Jonas and Threat making the decision. So I was really surprised that they would make such a huge decision, just the two of them, since it was going really well. Like I can understand, since my role when I started wasn't an in-game leader, but I've done it for like 2 years now. So I think it's enough to say I'm an in-game leader right now. So
sure,
I wouldn't take it away from me that easy. But I think it's I think making such a drastic decision was maybe a bit too fast, and since I don't think what I heard isn't that the reason wasn't any in-game based or performance-wise or stuff like that. So, or how I was calling, but was like a bit different. So I think it was something we could have talked over, I think, and fixed on the sidelines.
One thing I forgot to ask you about, actually, is obviously in NiP, during that weird period where, like, for the Major, you had to have Golden come as a stand-in, but he only came as a stand-in. As far as I know it, he didn't in-game leader. You were still the in-game leader when that happened?
Yeah, that's correct.
Is there a reason why NiP didn't consider, obviously not potentially to remove you, but maybe to give you a different one? Is there any reason why NiP didn't recruit Golden? Why did they let FNATIC do it later? Was it someone that was on the radar?
I think it was like at the same time it was a bit discussions in the team, since we already had like a plan I think we were going for, and it was a bit different what people thought, I think.
Right, since you were removed from NiP now, and it's been pretty clear from the way you've tweeted and the way you've commented yourself, It's not something you chose. You didn't say like, oh yeah, by the way, I'll just leave right now. So presumably you want to keep playing as a pro player, right?
Yeah, for sure. I'm still grinding like before. Since I can't practice right now, I have to play FPL and game still. If
we're in a world where maybe it's not a Swedish team that's going to pick you up, are you someone where, I mean, from this interview, you seem pretty comfortable in English. Would you like to be in an international team? Would you like, for example, this is always the classic question, would you play in North America if the right offer came along?
Yeah, I would definitely be open to play in NA. Sure, it's still the best for me to stay in EU since it's close to home, but sure. I would definitely be open to move to NA.
And what about in terms of how you'd like to play? Like, on the one hand, like, would you choose to stick with being in-game leader if that was the first choice? If there was a spot available, in-game leader is what they want. Is in-game leader what you would like to keep doing for a few years?
Yeah, for sure. If I got an offer as an in-game leader in a team I really like, I would definitely do it.
What do you think your strengths are as a leader?
I think my strengths is that I think I'm really good at finding out what my players have for tendencies and what they like to do, and I think I can make them want to do more things like in their positions.
Now, obviously, as you've referenced before, even though you're an in-game leader, you're one of the in-game leaders who will sometimes just put himself in the entry position. I mean, if people don't know, it just sometimes makes sense because it takes like some of the thinking away from the other players and you can time when you go in, etc. Like, there's a reason why a lot of the in-game leaders do that role. If you weren't the in-game leader, is that the sort of role that would most suit you? Is there a different way you'd like to play the game?
Yeah, for sure. I think since I played an entry fragger, since I played from public clear to FNATIC, it's the role I was most comfortable with back then. I've done it for a long time, same as in-game leading, so I'm really comfortable with both of them. And I think since in-game leaders are often a bit sacrificial in stats, I think that's why it's really good for them to have the first entry role in teams as well. And I think since I'm pretty good individually, I think it's good for me to still be entering and have a really good player trade me as well. So I think sometimes I get one or two, and or when I die, I have someone trade me real fast.
Well, even though you've been in all these Swedish teams with the big name players, the one thing that you haven't yet really had is like the deep run at the major. You've had success elsewhere. Like, as we said, you won that huge IEM, had a whole bunch of other tournaments you've been deep in. Are you really ambitious to do something at the majors?
Yeah, for sure. I think Boston is the closest I've been. We almost beat SK when I played in FNATIC, and we made it almost to the semi. We had a easier path than we would have before. So it's something I'm really striving forward to make a good impression in the major.
Okay, at the end of this interview, do you have any final words or a message, someone to thank, someone to say hello to?
I want to definitely say thanks to everyone who has had my back and supported me in these tough times. And it's really helped a lot since I've right now not having to play and practice stuff like that. So I'm just keeping grinding, streaming, and people showing up and watching it is really supportive. And
tack så mycket.
Yeah, no problem.
This video was kindly supported by Alexander Rao, Dean Tanglis, Emanuel Särnbratt, JDubs, NateDOhDoubleG, the Puyallup Tribe, Tobias Bernasconi, Xinged, and a special thanks always goes out to Jerky's Minion. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my shows? Maybe ask a question in my monthly video AMA? Do you want teasers? Who are the guests on my next content? Maybe you want to take part in one of those donated discussions with me where we go really deep into the weeds. Well, if so, put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today in the description box link below.